This interview was with lifelong friend, venture capitalist and games industry veteran Spike Laurie. The goal? To dig into the $150 billion a year gaming industry, both from a venture perspective and also to look at the cultural factors affecting this phenomenon. It comes with some regret that I experienced some audio issues with my mic while recording this, but I really hope it doesn't detract from some of the fantastic content Spike shares. He's a master storyteller and deeply passionate about the topic. So for anybody looking to go through a journey into the gaming industry and beyond, this should be a good interview for you. So without further ado, I introduce Spike Laurie. So Spike, over to you to just give maybe a little background about how you got into it and where you are today.
Very happy to, and thanks for having me on, Ed. My name's Spike Laurie. I've been in the games industry now for almost 10 years. I started out working at Warner Brothers, where we marketed games such as Batman Arkham Knight, Shadow of Mordor. I then got into sort of the world of eSports. I've always been a competitive gamer. I've always played sort of games like Counter-Strike since I was quite young, back in 2000. And therefore I got an opportunity to work on a game called Mortal Kombat, which we sort of blew up and explored sort of the online competitive space with in a way that hadn't been done before for that type of fighting game. I joined a company called ESL, which is the world's largest esports company, a little while back, helped them build their UK business, helped them build their Latin American business. And for my last 2 years there was in Los Angeles, managing the revenue pipeline for them, for all their activations, tournaments and leagues, and specifically working with game publishers. Last year, I have been working in the venture capital space, joining in Livingstone's new fund that we set up called Hiro Capital, which is a €150 million Series A and B venture capital fund focusing on games, studios, and the business of video games. I also have a startup on the West Coast called Prize Payments, where we facilitate the prize money handling globally, compliantly for esports tournaments. And that has also been going for about a year. So I've seen different facets of the games industry. And to your point earlier, Ed, have seen sort of both sides of the fence on the venture capital kind of startup world as well, within the context of video games.
Well, and also to give you a little plug while people are listening, you do a sort of semi-regular catch up with industry people on In Games, which is your YouTube following, your channel. So anybody who wants to, I think, get some continuity through that, that's probably a good place to check out for sort of more regular discussion around the topic. So when you started at Warner, was it with the idea that this was just following a passion, or do you think, you know what, I can sense opportunity here? Because was it a reasonably sort of new part of Warner?
It was actually interesting. A good friend of mine who I'd been working with on some ad hoc projects gave me a call and said, Spike, we've had to fire our intern. He fell asleep in a meeting and it just was the last straw.
Yeah.
We want to build out this muscle. And I was doing sort of short form video content at the time around video games. And he said, would you like to come and join and help us sort of, fill this gap of this sort of social digital marketing? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And went in and started from there. So like everything in life, it was lucky that someone fell asleep in a meeting and, there was an open headcount position.
Yeah. And so I guess at that time as well, they were probably crossing the bridge between understanding how digital marketing of their products or pre-launch campaigns would be becoming a really effective tool to launch, or maybe it's always been that way, right? Maybe it's just the marketing budgets were spent in a different fashion.
So the games industry is really, what I love about the video games industry is the boot cycle is so short. Things happen very, very quickly and they iterate very, very quickly. And I'll give you a great example of that. Sort of the way the business of video games, the monetization of video games. When you go 20 years ago, when you and I, Eddie, were playing on the PlayStation or the N64, or you would save up your money, you'd go to the shop, hour price or whatever it was, PC World back in the day.
Yeah.
You would hand over your £44.99 and you would leave with a game. And that was it. That was the game. Put it in, you played it, and that was your experience. And as the internet started to evolve and as the connectivity of games started to evolve, the business model evolved with that. And so what happened was the first iteration of that was what was called downloadable content, or DLC as we call it in the games industry. And what that allowed you to do is once you'd paid for your game, you might be able to then unlock a new map or a new level or
Is
a
this
new
sort of PC specific?
character.
Because obviously
It started in PC, but actually on console, once the consoles became connected, that became quite popular as well. So you would pay extra money to have additional things for your game. And some companies got in trouble for that. So Bethesda, for example, were very early in getting in trouble because they in Oblivion, I think it was, you could unlock a new island in the game if you paid money. But people figured out pretty quickly that island, the code for that island, was already on the disc that you bought.
Wow.
So what was marketed before as we've made the game, and we're going to make additional content to support the game afterwards, actually turned out to be, we're creating a business model now of here's the core product and we now want you to pay more. And so from that came...
Do you think, would you have had a situation where the studio was working on the project at the time and maybe they had a part of the map they were a bit iffy about, they weren't sure, like a director's cut, and they thought, well, it's our editorial decision to allow that to be used, and then after just seeing the pickup of the game, maybe they said, you know what, we will expand it rather than a...
It's a mix, but ultimately these decisions at video game companies are made in boardrooms or are made in senior management meetings by finance people with nice waterfall graphs and working out how much they can monetize. But the ultimate, what was learned here at the beginning of this time was, hang on, normally we would launch a game, market the game, done. We move on to the next game, and we might do some price pulses to try and keep the long tail revenue going. But it looked like this, the graph looked like that. Then they realized, well, hang on a second, we can sell the game for $44.99. Then we can also sell an extra £10 of content. So now we're making £55 out of every consumer rather than £45. That's good. Yeah. And we needed just a couple of people to stay on and to do that. So the curve now looks a little bit like that, a little bit more gentle. Then came the season pass, which basically that said, we're going to make DLC content. You can pay a lower price upfront, say £30, and you will get all the DLC content that we make for this game in the future. And so that created this sort of the season pass model, which is now ubiquitous, right? The season pass has actually been really well tweaked and finessed. So in Warzone or Apex Legends today, online multiplayer games, the season pass is actually a series of challenges that you unlock. So you pay £30. You might not get £30 worth of content. It depends how much you play it, how much you engage with the game. So that was sort of happening in the industry at the time. In the sort of 2010-11 with games like League of Legends, there was a launch of what's called the free-to-play model. And that originally had a pretty bad rap. But around the time of mobile, you want to get the game in people's hands. It's a friction, it's a barrier to charge people £50 for a game up front. Why don't we give the people the game for free? And the more they play the game, the more engaged with it, the more they'll pay. And we can now turn £55 or £85 with the season pass into £1,000, £500 or more, right? And so that was that's a model based on acquisition. You acquire users, top of the funnel, you retain them, and then you monetize them. League of Legends is probably one of the greatest examples of free-to-play PC games that did it really, really well. And free-to-play now has become, again, a really ubiquitous way of making and shipping games, especially on PC and mobile.
So take League of Legends.
The last thing I'll say, Eddie, sorry, is just like, so now jump forward to 2020. This is all happening 10 years ago. A game like Call of Duty, let's take Call of Duty because it's one of the biggest games, the most popular games. It is free. The Warzone mode is free to play. So you just download it. You don't have to buy anything. You can do microtransactions. You can buy DLC. You can buy operators or weapon skins. You can buy a season pass. You can do it all, right? And you can also pay for the premium version of the game, which brings the campaign mode and some other multiplayer functionality. So it is the modern business of video games takes all the monetization models, puts them all together, and that uncaps the revenue from every user. And so every user now on Call of Duty, I don't know what their average revenue per paying user is, but I would assume it's above £100, £120. So if you think about that, it's a really short boot cycle from 2005, let's say, to 2020, 15 years. The same business of making games has gone from £45 per person to 120 or more per person, just by using the levers of monetization.
Of commerce, right? Because what's interesting is if you think back to the days of old, and let's take it back to our sort of childhood gaming days, is when you got on board with a game franchise, actually what was exciting once you completed that game was the hype for the sequel. And the studio would be straight out going, how do you bring out Sonic 2 or Sonic 3? And then the fans would come with it. But there was still, I guess, a barrier to entry. I mean, some of the things that defined those early experiences with gaming for me was, especially with the N64, what did your friends play? Everybody's playing GoldenEye. Yeah. So I want to go round to their house, and that's why I want the N64, because then I can play a bit, go around to people's houses, and I can.
We had a great what was that wrestling game we had at as well?
WCW versus Nitro or something?
Yeah, that was great.
It was great. And the problem was, if you didn't play the games that your friends played, you sort of play to the de facto norm. You wouldn't have fun going around and playing with them. You'd be losing the whole time.
There was no online then, right? So you had to go and sit on the sofa and play 4-player on a tiny CRT.
Yeah, and have we started to erode that experience? Is the modern game experience or games industry there to serve the business model, or does it? Do you think it still serves the integrity of the social aspect of gaming?
100%. Gaming is becoming is so social. I mean, look at Fortnite. Look at Fortnite today, right? That is kids socializing, talking to their friends just through the medium of Fortnite. I played World of Warcraft for many years. I've made many friends in online games as I've played, and actually some of my most social experiences that I've had have actually been in video games, because it creates not only are you there to socialize, but you have a common goal that you're working towards.
Yeah. And
so that's cool when you say, wow, do you remember that time we were in Karazhan and we wiped and then this happened? Or, you can create narratives and bonds with people that transcend, unless you're in the army or unless you're, in a work environment together, transcends just the traditional social bonds of meeting up, having a few drinks.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think it does often or can translate readily into the real world. And obviously, you now have these subcultures spreading on the back of people, streaming on Twitch, or people who comment on games. And there's, look at KSI. He's one of the leading YouTubers, and he started off just playing FIFA, and people wanted to watch him experience that, which is also an interesting dynamic in itself, is that now you have ripples of other industries on the back of the engagement around this content. I mean, so back in your early days as well with ESL, I guess what I want to try and convey to people is you had stadiums full of people watching these tournaments. I mean, when did that start becoming part of the gaming experience as well?
Well, we've always called eSports the world's biggest niche. And it's really surprising to me how few people really understand the phenomenon of esports and the phenomenon of even the games industry itself. When you talk to people, there's still a stigma. There's still that's kind of weird. I don't understand that. And when you've been there in a stadium full of Katowice, I think we have over 100,000 people over a weekend. You've got sort of a good 20,000 people in the stadium watching players play, and you see the enjoyment. You see the kind of the energy. It's incredible, and
so what's that experience?
It surprises me that you have to explain that to people, because
if you've got your
no-brainer,
and you go,
with this?
Yeah.
What happens over the course of the weekend? Is it quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals? Is it loads of breakout rooms of people?
Yeah, it depends on the it depends on the format, but typically you have a group stage that happens over a few weeks, and then the sort of the final weekend will be let's say the or semi-finals and finals of the top teams in the world playing against each other for what could be $1 million in prize money, And if for people that attend, it's like being at a music concert. It's like being at it's you are enjoying the zeitgeist that you are a part of with your friends, watching some of the most skilled and talented people in the world on stage, playing for serious money, serious stakes in what is a pretty incredible, let's take Counter-Strike, a very tactical, very high skill ceiling game, and you're watching the very, very best in the world do that. It's like being at a football match, like being at anything.
That's true. And I think for anything that's done to a high level of skill, it's only when you play it or do it or see what it is that they're doing that you can appreciate how good they are, right? To anybody watching two people play Mortal Kombat, I remember in Fulham Broadway when they had the Gfinity, was it?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and we watched Mortal Kombat play, and relative to each other, obviously, they're both so good that you aren't sure what's going on, but I'm sure if you play the game, you can see exactly how much skill. And I think wherever there's that level of skill, you can at least appreciate, that it's actually not available to everybody. Which one thing was very interesting about, you took me to, was it where was it, the BAFTA place, where they're talking about the eSports teams and how the fitness worked and the training in the houses and stuff like that. It was somebody, and he was talking about the regiments that they how seriously they take it, right down to their nutrition, right down to making sure they're.
I mean, esports, players or athletes, whatever you want to call them, many of them are earning more than professional athletes do, and therefore, the regiment that they go through is just as demanding, just as taxing as if you were a professional chess player or professional tennis player, or obviously it's not as physically active, but there's a lot of it's concentration, it's you're managing burnout, you're managing reaction times, you have the teamwork, communication. There's so many, if you think about it, the level of communication that's required for 5 players playing League of Legends or Dota or Counter-Strike is orders of magnitude higher than the communication required for a football team, or the level of concentration and managing minute details and reaction speed is as high as, let's say, a tennis player. And every sport's different, and it's not about is esports and are they comparable. Of course they're different. Everything is different. Everything is unique. But I think these guys are at the top of their game, and like anything, they're having fun as well.
It was something I was reading about. It was, I think, one of the top StarCraft players. He'd basically doing something like 120 keyboard shortcuts per minute, and if you start
APM actions per minute is the kind of the gauge you use for a StarCraft player of how active they are.
Yeah,
and so in StarCraft there are 3 different races, species: Terran, which is humans; Protoss, which is this sort of advanced, futuristic kind of artificial intelligence; and the Zerg, which are this very organic bio kind of swarm, like the monsters from Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
And each has its very unique play style. That's why StarCraft was so popular. One of the reasons is it was asymmetric. What was before, in a strategy game, both sides were roughly the same. You had your peons, you had your art range units, with StarCraft, the play style for each race is very idiosyncratic. And for Zerg, it's all about macro play, having 2 or 3 bases going at once on different sides of the map, having to move, creep around the map so that your minions can move quicker. And so Zerg player, his actions per minute have to be very, very high. And what the players do is, even from the beginning, when you start with 1 or 2 units and they go and mine some gas, or they go and mine some resources, they are already all fingers are already moving at the high APM that they need in the late game of the match, 40 minutes later, because if they don't get into that habit and that speed, they're not at the level they need to be at. So it is, when you see them do it, and when you see the APM, and you see, you know, it really is, it's quite incredible. And we're getting quite, is this right, Eddie? Is this the sort of stuff that you're happy to talk about?
Yes,
because I guess you could go down a few rabbit holes here.
No, I think it's got to be unearthed. I think if people don't appreciate the skill level, then they're never going to sort of get an insight into, you know, again, it's like those things. That's actually like a physical characteristic, like playing the piano, where you have to work at scales and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
What I find interesting as well about it is the games industry is so well prepped to I guess be the canary down the mine for how things should be done, because as you've alluded to, with stuff being tracked, with data, with everything, it's like you've got this gamified world which, you know, on some level it shows up our sort of how we deal with strategic problems. It shows how we deal with rewards in life when they're engineered, and we puppet these universes, and then we see how people behave in them. Then we see how we can, you know, influence that with monetization models and stuff like this. So it's complete sort of like blueprint for what we can start to sort of push into the real world and how we can start to learn. Because as you said, the speed with which it became professionalized with the professional gaming industry is exceeded some sports tenfold, right? It took them years to professionalize, and this has done it in 5 years or
well, the games industry has been able to borrow, right? So that's one of the benefits is, again, coming back to that short boot cycle. The games industry has been able to borrow from other industries and apply it to its own industry, because it's a purely digital phenomena. You can move much quicker. And, you know, it's you know, a lot of people might be surprised to hear that the games industry today is bigger than the music and movies industries combined.
Wow.
You know, in 2019, the games industry was worth $150 billion. And that's forecast in 10 years' time to be $250 billion. So not only is it growing very quickly, it's already pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't realize, video games are the entertainment medium of 2000s and will continue to be.
So to give a landscape, because I think people would often think that this intense gaming culture was something sort of that sort of was resided in Southeast Asia, where you'd hear these stories of people who'd stay up for days and not eat and play games. But in terms of the world map, where it is every country on the planet now part of this market, or are you seeing markets suddenly popping up and growing?
It's an interesting question. So you have kind of, every market has its nuances. So as you can imagine, India, Southeast Asia, and Asia, mobile is the gaming medium of choice.
Okay.
And the reason for that is probably socioeconomic. You know, we're very lucky in the West. You know, we have cheap credit. We have things are relatively attainable for us. So the first thing you are going to buy out of a computer, a console, and a phone is a phone. We all have mobile phones. The second thing you might buy is a console if you're a bit more of a casual gamer, or a PC if you're a hardcore gamer, or you've got your laptop for work or whatever. So in the West, you're going to have 2 or 3 of those things, and therefore you can spend your money on get console games or PC games or whatever, and you use your phone mainly as a communication tool. But in more emerging markets, your phone is everything, because it is hard to attain that technology. You're not going to then have a phone and then something else. You're going to always want the latest phone, because it's your communication tool. In Asia, it's your payment tool. It's your entertainment tool. It's everything. And so games like mobile PUBG are gangbusters in Southeast Asia and India. And actually, you would have seen that, owned by Tencent, mobile PUBG is now in India being, the responsibilities for running that are now being taken by Bluehole. It's a Korean company. but who make PUBG in the first place. But mobile gaming is huge in emerging markets. Whereas here in the West, it's mostly console gaming or PC gaming. Again, depends how you split it, depends how you define gaming. Casual games on mobile are now becoming very, 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 very prevalent, and it's opening up the demographics as well of who identifies as a gamer, who plays video games, and what sort of games they play. But yeah, it's different markets, different kind of flavors and ways to game.
Well, and to give somebody some background, what is PUBG?
PUBG is a battle royale. So traditionally in video games, you have had, different flavors of online games. So you might have RTS, real-time strategy games like Warcraft or Starcraft. You've got MMOs like World of Warcraft, which means massively multiplayer online games, World of Warcraft, Ultimate Online, EverQuest. You have first-person shooters like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike. These are the sort of main flavors. And you have MOBAs, massively online battle arenas, League of Legends and Dota. These are sort of terms for the different types of online games, different flavors. And about a few years ago, a new one entered the arena called a battle royale. Does what it says on the tin. 100 people, and PUBG really launches a fantastic guy called Player Unknown, and that's why it's called PUBG, Player Unknown's Battlegrounds. He originally started as a modder working on mods for a game called Arma 3, which was a military simulator. And he created a mod called DayZ, which was sort of an open Walking Dead style survival game. You land, you have nothing, you have to find a piece of body armor, you have to find a pistol if you're lucky, you have to try and repair a car, and you've got to survive. He then took that to the next level and kept iterating, and he created PUBG. It's an island, 100 players parachute out of a DC-10 or one of those big kind of military planes. You can land anywhere on the island you want. You have nothing. You start with nothing. You need to find clothes, equipment, weapons, upgrades for weapons. So you might start with an M4, but you've got no ammo. You need to get some ammo. You'll need to get a scope. You'll need to get you can tech it up. At the same time, the world is shrinking. There is this unknown gas circle that is slowly shrinking on the map, moving everybody into the center. And so you have to try and survive, stay alive, kill and loot from people that you come across, and make it into the final circle. And that's where the word winner, winner, chicken dinner comes from, because that's what it used to say if you were the winner. So you can imagine, Eddie, I've seen a lot of these screens. It's winner, winner, chicken dinner, and you have completed it. So very hard game, lots of randomness, and based on sort of battle, the Japanese film Battle Royale or Hunger Games, right, is the modern interpretation of it.
Well, it's always a sort of interesting fantasy what if narrative, Korra style question. If I was stranded, how would I make do? And I think what's interesting about those is they highlight the skill. But I think in a situation like that, you're being put under pressure. You may want to camp out somewhere. And then luck, sometimes you appear behind somebody and you think, well, all right, there we go.
Yeah.
Which is, a great way for, I don't know, getting people to sort of, again, handle pressure and all these other weird skills that might come with it.
And look, Battle Royale has now become the big, one of the biggest game modes. Call of Duty Warzone, Fortnite is a Battle Royale. That was originally a PvE game, player versus environment, and they pivoted over a weekend. They said, "Wow, what if we just, what if we copy PUBG and put it in Fortnite and add some building mechanics? Let's see how it goes." And it went gangbusters.
And what material difference did that make to their sort of their revenue or their?
Well, Epic's is a incredible company, and they've been around for a long time. Tim Sweeney, is really a visionary, and they started with remember the game Unreal Tournament back in the day. But they make the engine that other games are constructed on. So they make the actual kind of material that you can build video games with. It's called the Unreal Engine. And that started off, in order to make their own games, they created this engine, and they have a fantastic business around it. It's now transcended video games. It's moved into, The Mandalorian, the Disney Plus series was shot using Unreal technology. Any car that you buy and use a configurator on, it's designed in Unreal these days. So really, they are a fantastic company. And as they were sort of had this big muscle of creating this game engine that about 50% of the industry uses, it's not really 50%, but there are two non-proprietary engines, Unity and Unreal. EA uses their own called Frostbite. A few others use their own. But in general, there are these two sort of players, Unity and Epic, to simplify things. And at the same time, they've always had a few divisions that were sort of ticking away, building games using the engine. As you can imagine, right, there's benefits from doing that to both sides. And they had two games out, I'm pretty sure, Paragon, and they were working on, and Fortnite at the same time. Let me just fact check that. And they ended up closing down the Paragon team to focus just on Fortnite, and they moved a lot of resources because they saw the early indicators of success, and they, like any smart company would do, they moved very quickly to then scale and to support that. And what Fortnite did, which was rather exceptional, is it took this battle royale concept, but PUBG is a hyper-realistic game, realistic weapons, realistic blood, realistic trajectories. You can cut car tires to stop your opponents from escaping. And they kind of made it a bit more fun, more accessible, toned down the violence, made it cartoony. And so you have this huge Minecraft cohort of players who were looking for the next thing, who had grown out of Minecraft.
Minecraft, yeah, I was going to say.
And so there's a bit of serendipity there. There's a bit of smartness. There's, like anything, right? It's kind of, it's not clear cut, but, and so, yeah, Fortnite has become this sort of incredible success that it is today. And it's a fantastic game. It's made very well, and it's doing very well.
Well, so, okay, just to loop back to Minecraft, right? So there is a game that did phenomenally well. And to the uninitiated, one might go, what is it that incentivizes people to live in a world just to, again, correct me on anything I get wrong here, to construct objects or worlds or realities? What's the game dynamic? What's the hook that made it so addictive for people?
You mean Fortnite specifically, or
not Fortnite? Minecraft. So if you took Fortnite, it's to win the battle royale, right? Like I conquer everything. In Minecraft, it felt a bit more passive. It felt like people. I saw videos of people who construct these amazing, like replicas of Notre Dame and stuff like this, and they'd spend hours. So what?
Well, Minecraft is what we call a sandbox game. So, and it's called sandbox for a reason, right? You can play, you can do what you want in it, but it also had this great kind of multiplayer hook. So you and I could be in the same sandbox world together. Mm-hmm. We can construct, we can build things. It has a survival mechanic. You start with nothing. You need to chop down trees. You need to get materials. You need to then start to build stuff. And there are, at nighttime, zombies around, or as you dig deep, you find these sort of spiders or other creatures down there. So it was a really interesting mix of sandbox, survival, and building, which was kind of rare before that, actually. Again, it just hit the zeitgeist at the time. The graphics were this sort of 16-bit kind of cartoony look, which made it very accessible, and it was a lot of fun. I remember when it first came out, we had a group of us that used to play all the time. I built this really elaborate pirate ship, which was just cool. And then overnight, when I logged off, someone collected some lava and poured lava on the top of it, and the whole ship set on fire. And then he WhatsApped the picture to me, and everyone found that hilarious. So it sort of, it's just play. It's just play. And as like human beings, we love to play. We do so much through play, whether we realize it or not.
It's true.
And games just allow you to tap into that kind of primal desire of human beings to play with each other in a kind of, with a kind of a rule set. You need a rule set.
Yeah.
And it allows you to do that, which in real life is further and farther between, especially as the world becomes more sanitized.
I agree. I think you want, you want ever increasingly more challenging simulated environments. I mean, that is the goal of play, right? If you take two small animals, they'll play, but no one doesn't continually dominate the other. Otherwise, somebody ceases to play the game, right? It has to be at a challenge or a level where you can keep progressing, but it's also not so easy that you don't care about the outcome. Which is one thing I find fascinating about the gaming industry is they must have so much knowledge about how they architect or construct these worlds to make them addictive. I mean, when you look at some of them, you think, how on earth did they dream this all up or create this world and make sure all the dynamics of the strategy of the game are in balance? And actually, to ask you that question, how do the game studios ensure that the game is fair, challenging enough? Do they just play lots and lots of it before they release it, or do they know implicitly sort of how to balance the dynamics?
Well, I think it's a mix. So, you've got some very experienced teams, like anything. The more experienced you are, the more kind of intuition you have for this sort of stuff. Luckily, with video games, the clay is computer code. So you can try things, you can play them, you can boot up a version of the world, you can play it, you can very easily tweak, things, and QA is a really important part of the game's process. Now more and more with competitive games, which I come back to a little bit. I apologize, it just happens to be my focus is you can now the esports industry exists. If you're making a game, and Riot Games did this with Valorant, their new first-person shooter, they hired Counter-Strike professional players, a year before release, well into development, to play and to test and to treat the game as if it was a professional, hyper, competitive first-person shooter, and took all that feedback and put it back into the game design. And actually, one of my critical critiques of Valorant is that it is almost too clinical in the skill that you need. It's all about angles. It's all about well-placed shots, and actually, for me personally, and it's just subjective, I lose a little bit of the fun out of it, because you can see that they really took a lot of advice from the pro players in other existing first-person shooter games, which is a great thing to do, because their ambition for the game is for it to be one of these top-tier, watchable titles.
Well, that's it, right? Do you create a gamer's game, in which case you have the elites of the sport turning up and all the who's who endorsing it, playing it, competing over it, and then that sets the influence for everybody else to start joining in? Or whether you go, actually, we're going to go indie, we're going to go niche, we're going to do something different. There was a really interesting game I was watching where you're like a guy who lives in a mountain range who puts out fires or something.
Yeah, that was. I think that won an award, a BAFTA award or something. I know what you mean.
The story, right?
Yeah.
And I think what I'm seeing now, and probably where I'm getting confused in terms of really pulling this all together, is I see so many different worlds in the gaming industry. Whereas back in the early days, I saw consoles. That was my way of being immersed. And a few people had PCs, but it was, as you say, it was a little bit of a sort of step up, and was contingent on the quality of your hardware. Like sometimes you'd buy a game, take it back, stick it in your PC, and it wouldn't work because you didn't have the graphics card, or you didn't have enough, it wasn't Pentium 3 or whatever. And now I see there's games where there's a deeply individual story-led experience. There's ones where it's collaborative, passive, sandbox. There's ones where it's hyper-competitive. There's simulations for real life, which is all the sort of sport genre ones. And then you kind of go into the world of VR and all these other gaming experience. And then you have, I guess, offline traditional games, right? So it's this, well, and I'd even then say the mobile game experience felt like it was its own thing as well. So in terms of how, if we had a pie chart of the world and how you saw it breaking down, which one is the dominant of the sort of consoles, PC, this, that, the other?
I think that's the beauty of it. There is a medium for everyone. There is a game type for everyone. There is a way to play for everybody. I love hyper competitive games on PC, but the game that I'm playing the most at the moment is, a Cold War submarine simulation game, which is very slow, very tactical, and again, there's a huge number of people that love playing those sorts of games. And the flip side, there's a huge number of people that love playing fast shooters like Call of Duty. There's a huge number of gamers that love playing Candy Crush. Like, that's the beauty of the games world. It is great entertainment, and there is something for everyone out there.
Because I think I sometimes felt a bit shortchanged on, I really connected with some of the old story-led games, and the single-player experiences on some games like Perfect Dark or even GoldenEye was a fantastic.
You loved Ocarina of Time as well, I remember.
Love Zelda Ocarina of Time. I thought it was brilliant, right? You got completely brought into that world. And nowadays I feel that it always starts with online first. I should be there logging in. And then the problem is if you feel that that's the experience and you go into Call of Duty and play a load of people who are playing, let's talk about teenagers or kids. They're not recreational players. They're putting in like 6 hours a day sometimes. And you don't really get a foothold in the game. You can't participate. And so sometimes I miss the fact you could just have that sort of strategic focus where I felt the game designers had built this whole universe just for you, right? Whereas now it's a bit like they throw you into this.
Yeah, but there are great single player games out there. Zelda Breath of the Wild is a masterpiece, and well worth buying a Switch for just for that title alone. Again, it comes back to, yes, the online competitive world can be quite daunting, but I mean, that's really just a tiny piece of the games industry.
But would I be a less interesting business model as somebody who wanted to play a single player game, given that the competitive nature of a multiplayer game is more likely to get me to buy upgrades and seek.
Correct, but a competitive multiplayer online game requires more live operations, requires more, and people scrape, making sure people aren't cheating, a bigger community challenge, a bigger kind of eSports program around it. So again, the video games industry is a very profitable industry. And when you think about it, compared to other industries, you have an opportunity for incredible scale, which doesn't have your fixed cost base does not have to scale with it because it's a purely digital product. So there is a lot of money to be made in video games. And so to the point of you being a bad customer or no, that's not true. There are business models for all sorts of gamers, and these business models are successful, and these studios are successful at sort of every different level of the pie.
Well, I think it's very interesting when you talk about Epic actually breaking out of this world. It's like people may not think, you might ask my mum, she'd sort of go, video games are nerds or whatever, and she'd criticize it because it's not how she grew up, and she makes this sweeping snap judgment. But if she goes and watches a film where, the Unreal Engine's now shaping the CGI that you're watching, it's starting to become entertainment. It becomes all forms of entertainment, actually. And we do some work through raising for startups where we deal with digital twins, which are obviously simulated architectural environments, which look at the interplay between, Wi-Fi coverage, this, that, the other, for designing our urban landscapes. And actually the guy who designed it, Michael Jansen, their team originally worked on Google Earth, and they say it's like SimCity, but for the real world. And so it's like the drip is going out, which I find fascinating. And you also see like a hint in the sort of business environment of people trying to sort of gamify life or achievement, or LinkedIn, you're sort of assigning points to your CV and all these sort of scoring mechanics and stuff like that. So do you see technology crossover, like let's say with something like virtual reality, into the sort of B2B space, the business space?
Yeah, 100%. It's already here, right? So architects using virtual reality headsets to walk around the spaces that they're creating. When you're buying a car these days, it's been designed in a game engine. McLaren or whatever, it's been designed in the Unreal Engine. When gamification has just the idea of gamification is completely transcended, into we understand the power of engagement and the understand of how of like doing quests or leveling up or hitting achievements, right? Like Duolingo, fantastic app.
Yeah.
really leaned into the world of video games for inspiration. And so, look, I think video games are the fabric of reality. Used to be bricks and mortar, and it is now as much defined by digital bits and than it is by the physical. And video games have really been the tip of the spear in that respect, because they have really led the charge in the world of the digital, in the world of the sort of creating tools which you can then use to apply to the real world.
And so, from the game design's point of view, they release the game. What and how much do they learn about the users? I mean, how granular is the data that they're using to inform their decisions now becoming?
Oh, I mean, as granular as you want, right? Because it's your game. You can track anything you want in, you can see whether the user clicks. You can see how long they spend on this. You can see how many people are buying item X versus item Y. You can literally scrape the chat log and see what people are saying about things or how people are communicating. I mean, you really, all that data is there for you to tweak and to change. And there are good things and bad things to that, right? So loot boxes have been a very contentious issue in the games industry.
What sort of that?
So the idea that when you, instead of buying a sword, the legendary sword of Arkansas or whatever you want to call it, you can buy a mystery box which gives you a 1% chance of getting this legendary sword.
It sounds a lot like a slot machine, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. And the gambling industry is learning from the games industry very quickly, and it is insidious. So to give you an example, when you open one of these loot boxes, or the lawyers from Epic or EA would like you to call them mystery boxes. But when you open a loot box, you, first of all, the screen shakes, and then the box lights up, and then it explodes, and the screen flashes, and bright colors come up, and you have got this purple legendary item, and this blue rare item, and this green common item, and this gold super legendary item. And so you feel you're getting this kind of feedback loop, this dopamine hit from the screen, right? Now think about it. A game takes 40 minutes to play of, let's say, Counter-Strike or PUBG or StarCraft. You might win, you might not. It's hard.
Yeah.
You win, it feels great, right? But you come close, you don't win. But you get that dopamine hit from that from 40 minutes of play. Or you can spend $5 and get that quick dopamine hit from the loot box and some cool legendary item or whatever. Now, why that is a problem, as you can imagine, because you have young children, you have vulnerable people who are spending money that in some instances they don't have, or it's their parents' money, in case of a lot of hype news articles about FIFA Ultimate Team being a perfect example of this. And what's actually worse about it is that you need these items to be powerful in the game. You need Ronaldo. You need Ronaldo to be great at FIFA. I'm not a big football fan, but I assume Ronaldo is a good player. I hear him talk about that. You need this player to be really good. You need this legendary weapon to be really good at this game. You need, so that is why it's a problem, because you're now creating that kind of, again, it comes back to what we originally talked about at the beginning of the podcast. So a good end of the chapter here, but about monetization. That is a new form of monetization that was pioneered in the games industry.
Yep.
That is now being copied and used by other industries, specifically the gambling industry, to uncap monetization to create more money without creating more content
or more value for the user, right?
Correct. And you can argue the other side. Well, it's fun. Well, it creates a rarity system. It rewards the engaged players. You can argue it's just like Panini stickers. Lots of arguments for and against. I think I fall on the against side personally. But now regulation is coming in, and you need to at least say what the odds are. You need to at least say you've got a 5% chance of getting this item. You've got a 10% chance of getting this. So people can make more informed decisions. But yes, a perfect example of why the games industry, because it is digital, because it has a short boot sequence, because you've got the very intelligent people working on fun problems, things move very quickly.
And I assume the problem there is if you've got a young kid trying to take a lawsuit against a big game studio developer, it's going to be incredibly difficult to make much inroads into sort of making a case for the fact that you squandered a bit of your parents' money and potentially are picking up gambling dynamics or so I think so. Having done biology at university, I think that something would be really interesting to monitor games for is the relationship between games and the sort of the dopamine reward pathways. And as you say, with some instances, you I'm sure be able to see that there's this big dopamine dump, and then the ensuing depression that comes with it. Somebody, as you say, they're pumping away money in, reward out. The dopamine's sparking afterwards. They're going to get this low while their brain needs to sort of rebalance itself. And I guess what I hope is that most games have a well balanced relationship between not exploiting that, but also not leaving the user in a sort of state of passive apathy afterwards, because life doesn't reward them the same way, and their attention spans are not being catered for in the same way.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I know that games are fun.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun playing video games my whole life. I continue to play video games. I play more than most people, and perhaps more than I should. But everything in moderation. I'm not a. This isn't an area of expertise for me. I think are video games engaging? Yes. Do game publishers and studios work hard to make their games more engaging? Yes. Can some people spend too much time playing video games? Yes. Can some people play too little time playing video games? Yes. I think there are probably a few games that everyone should have played by now. Final Fantasy VII, Breath of the Wild, Wind Waker. I can think of lots of great games that are in the canon that I would just argue people should have played as much as they should have read a particular book or have watched a particular film. But what is clear is that the games industry and video games are growing, becoming more engaging, and shaping the fabric of society. And I particularly find that exciting.
Was that so? One company that I think you've been involved with that interests me in the context of gaming and self-improvement. I'm not going to get the name right, but it's the one where it's the VR immersive experience, and you can box or you move, and
FitXR, yeah,
FitXR. And you've got these games where I think VR could be an amazing force for contact time with certain skills. Yeah, it's not going to be the same as really boxing and getting hit. Everybody's got plans until they get hit in the face, but at the same time, just that repetition, the familiarity with the movements, the speed, like even something like cricket, right? Just being able to create the simulation of where you think the flight of the ball is going to go. All you need is continuous exposure to that relationship and actually a feedback loop, so you can start to monitor, improve, engage, and make incrementally better decisions without it being a happy accident. And that's one thing I think VR would be amazing for, is you can get, imagine if I was really into cricket and I load up an over from Glenn McGrath and he bowls his perfect delivery over and over again such that I can get the timing, the speed. It's like that. That is amazing.
I love VR. I did a panel discussion a few weeks ago where us, the panelists, were in VR headsets in a VR auditorium, sitting on a VR sofa, chatting to each other in VR. And the audience, there was an audience of 30 people, all other venture capitalists, investors, and people part of the VR ecosystem, in their headsets, in their avatars, sitting on virtual reality sofas. Yeah. And you're in the space, and people are putting their hands up to ask questions. Or
value of their fund written above their head, so you can choose who you need to speak to, right?
No, but the sound was spatial, so you could have breakout groups and you could chat to someone, hey, how's it been? And you still hear the mumble of people in the background and go out. You can't do that on Zoom. You can't do that in other mediums. And to your point, VR gives us new ways to experience things or play things, and it's never going to be the same as real life. It's always going to be different. But if you can find those applications where it does work, where it does add value, where it does create stuff, and FitXR is a brilliant example. You know, you are in this incredibly futuristic Blade Runner-like environment with these pyramids that look like they've been built by aliens, civilization off in the background, this kind of binary sunset that's happening, and the synth music playing, and these things flying at you, and you are just like, that is much more, that could be for some people much more motivational and just, you know, than going to a gym, signing in, putting on some sweaty gloves that someone else has used, you know, hitting a boxing bag while not feeling self-conscious about what other people are thinking about you, right? To whatever, you know, Lady Gaga is playing on the speakers, you know, or Sky News playing on the screen. Like, that is a much better way to get people to you know, to explore fitness, to use their body, and to learn a skill that could be useful. Like, that is cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, it also relies on nudge economics, right? Which we've got a good friend of mine runs a company called Sweatcoin, and that is simply attributing cryptocurrency to movement, which suddenly gives you a value. Therefore, walking 10,000 steps becomes a derivative currency that you can then use to buy or get discounts on trainers. So the whole, I find it really interesting, because sometimes I'll just think, I'm going to get the bus home, and then think, well, actually, you know what? There's another 2,000 steps this way.
I'm going to earn a few sweat coins.
I earn a few sweat coins. And I don't know what I'm going to spend them on. But the point is, I then look and think, wow, I tallied something up. So there was some tangible to that effort. And I don't know why I need that in life. But
now I know why you walk everywhere. I always wondered why you walked everywhere. You were so sweaty when you turned up.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, if I, you know, should probably start running and getting on all the Stravas and the competitive fitness apps and stuff like that. But I do think these things are powerful, and yeah, I mean, you're talking about the gaming, the reach, getting into people's sitting rooms and getting them to burn a few calories playing, get some sport. So I would have a question for you now, because that's when it kind of leaks into the living room, it leaks into the social space of the family home. And I guess stuff like Peloton is probably doing or working on similar things of how they kind of invigorate people. What's the world of family gaming and or female gaming look like in terms of the industries and how they're getting in contact with them?
Yeah, it's incredibly rich and it's incredibly cool. And you've got companies like Nintendo who really are the pioneers here. You know, the Nintendo Wii, when it came out, changed the game for a lot of families and for a lot of people in video games. You know, Wii Tennis is still, I think, one of the all-time greatest games. Very simple, very well done, great fun, and we've all played it. And so I think, you know, Nintendo keep pushing the envelope there with different games. You know, you can now, they've got this great cardboard, you can construct machines out of cardboard that are then like, you know, connect to your console or do cool stuff. Or they've got a Ring Fit device, which is basically like a Pilates ring, which they've created games around, and people have a lot of fun using that. So I think that, again, there are game studios or game publishers or hardware companies in the case of Nintendo who are actively making games for that market. And there are you would be surprised, the gamer demographic has completely been blown open. There are, you know, women gamers are almost as ubiquitous as male gamers now, or more so in some genres. In some genres of game, there are more women players than men.
Can I ask you for any examples?
I don't want to get it wrong. I'd have to look at a chart. But in the, you know, in narrative-based mobile games, for example, and there's a studio called Fusebox, which make a Love Island game, which is doing very, very well within that demographic, as you could imagine. And it is a story-based, you know, meeting people, matching with people, trying to win the game of Love Island on a mobile game. That's a really, you know, that's a really cool game for certain people. Yeah. And has been doing very, very extremely well.
Well, I always find it interesting with games where there's a formula and the delivery model or skin is the brand or show or celebrity on top of it. So you might have, I think I don't know, Kim Kardashian had a game that she released, and soon the context will change and it'll be another celebrity that's going to be papered over the top of that model and then delivered a game, because ultimately you've got a fan base that wants to kind of keep up with your universe, right? Where do game studios sit with... Well, let me take a step back. I feel that the movie industry could be accused of playing it quite safe and saying, here's a formula that works. We could try something new. It's always great when they do and they hit a home run. But with the game studios, where do they sit in terms of playing it safe versus being willing to take a risk on, as you say, a model that is a little bit unknown?
Well, as you can imagine, right, the bigger the company, the more corporate the company, the less risk that they take. There's a formula. Here's how we make a game. We release it. Here's how we market it. We cost us X. We're going to make Y. So for the big boys, that's kind of that's how it works. What's great about the games industry, and where I think the movie industry has failed, is at discovery, and also the barriers to entry to making a game. Mm-hmm. Like, you can make a film, you can make a film on a phone, you can do that, right? But distributing that is very difficult. Whereas with video games, there are a lot of very talented, hardworking, passionate indie game studios that are making games. And that could be 2 people, that could be 1 person, that could be 5 people, that could be 10. But they have a good route to putting that game out there, to publishing it via Steam or the Epic Store, and then users being able to find those games and talk about them to their friends and play them, and therefore there is a lot of risk taking, but it's because the indie studios, because there's such an easy route to look. When I say easy, it's very difficult and challenging to make a video game and to publish it. And I have so much admiration for anyone that does that, because they really are sticking their head above the parapet and doing something that's challenging and requires a lot of skills to get right. So I have nothing but admiration for game studios, and I love talking to indie developers every opportunity I can. But there is a really good opportunity there that just doesn't exist in other industries.
It's interesting. I was going to say to kind of get your investment hat on now. Your fund. So maybe a little background on Hiro. Yeah, exactly. Where the sponsors cap. But to give some context, so Hiro Capital was formed. Where was it dreamt up by Ian, and how does it look now?
So Hiro Capital was founded by 3 partners: Luke Alvarez, Cherry Freeman, and Ian Livingstone. Sir Ian Livingstone, I should call him, otherwise he'll give me a clip around the ear. Has been in the games industry since 1976, and when he launched Dungeons and Dragons in Europe, and founded Games Workshop, which is today a billion dollar industry, and that was sort of tabletop, and you should have Ian on the show. I'm sure he'd love to come on and join you, because he's a really fascinating person.
Actually, there's a good in-games interview you did with him, so anybody wanted to see Ian, Spike's already done a great interview with him. It's well worth checking out.
Thanks, Eddie. From there, he then got into the video games world and launched a studio called Eidos, which also went on to be a $1 billion company. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, Hitman, the first Lego Star Wars game. Since then, he's been a prolific seed and angel investor in a lot of game studios. Have a huge success with Playdemic that got sold to Warner Brothers, and then he's actually been in Mediatonic, which created Fall Guys, and a few other great studios. And so he sort of identified a problem in the games industry on the funding side of things, which is there's a lot of angel and seed money in video games, because people that do well in games want to pay it back and see the opportunity. But it's also a very hit-driven industry. So what happens is a studio will get seed money, angel money, create a game, it'll do well, and they'll get very quickly emanate into a US game publisher or a Chinese conglomerate. And actually, out of the top 100 games, about 50% are made in Europe. We've got a really great tradition of creative, talented game designers and creatives, and that, you know, Supercell, DICE, Rockstar, Rocksteady, great examples of fantastic game studios in Europe. So we over-index in talent, but they get emanate very early into US and Chinese. So there's a funding gap. So the goal of Hiro Capital is to fill that funding gap, to provide Series A and B funding to game studios, and to really help them scale, build their intellectual property, build out their team, and reach their potential properly, and not sort of have to make concessions too early. And the other thing is, you know, from a pure investment perspective, European valuations are much more sensible than West Coast valuations.
True.
And therefore, you know, as a fund, our thesis is we know video games can scale really, really well, that they can be successful. We know that there's a funding gap that we can fill, and we know we can get them at good valuations. So that is our primary thesis on, from a purely investment perspective, why we invest the amounts of money we do at the stage that we do in the geographies that we do.
Well, you can see the problem, right, writ large, and I'll give some context for the UK angel industry, which is we are heavily dependent on financial services professionals, and actually as an intermediary in that space, often by the time a gaming deal has made its way to my desk, it's done the rounds of the who's who within the gaming industry of the people who will understand the value. So it's old leather, and then we're selling it to people who are not as well versed with the industry. And the problem is, if you've got all the early game developers being acquired, being taken over to the West Coast, when they get their payouts, they'll probably do a couple of years out in America. The money will go back into local games, opportunities, studios, this, that, the other. And so actually we miss out on recycling it into the UK ecosystem, which is why it's obviously really important that you guys get involved. And what I find interesting about Hiro is it seems on some level that some of these early stage gaming ideas, studios, teams almost can get into VC very quickly, because you spot the opportunity right from the get-go. You see a sort of very early stage idea and go, that's great, we'll fund it right away. There's no reason for it to sort of go through friends, family, this, that, the other, because what they need is industry experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Agreed. That'd be a fair thing to say, right? So actually you can remodel the landscape as we traditionally know it in the UK, and presumably after a while, I don't know if Ian's got any ambitions to create his own sort of venture builder studio, Hiro.
Well, Ian's going even further. He's built a school.
Okay, cool.
You know, and he's built a school with the focus on giving its students the tools they need for the digital future that is coming.
And what do you school? What does he think you need to school them in? Because obviously, the one thing I'd say about the gaming industry is it's creative.
Ian famously added, a couple of years back, computer programming to the school curriculum, which wasn't there before. I mean, that's an incredible, hugely important skill. No matter what industry you're in, to be able to code is incredibly important. And from a British perspective, or from a UK perspective, it's really important that our country and its students are set up for the world that they're going into, not the world that they're coming from. And, things like being able to code is a great example of that.
Well, and it's interesting, and when people credit our games industry, Rockstar, they always talk about the creative industries here, right? That we have a decent creative brand, creation, advertising industry. Like we're quite mature in some industries, and so actually we can probably punch a little bit above our weight. And what I found so interesting,
I think we do, right? I think Britain and Europe have got a fantastic tradition, but Britain especially, of creativity, of storytelling, of even if you look at sports, the way that competitiveness. all these things are really, great. And we're innovators, and we're creators, and inventors, and all that stuff comes together. And I think that's why we are very good at creating games.
Can I get your view on how significant Rockstar's achievements have been to the UK gaming industry?
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, Rockstar, for everybody who doesn't know, made the Grand Theft Auto series,
Yep.
which are probably one of the which are probably one of the biggest. And Dave Jones, the guy, the original creator of Grand Theft Auto, and BMG, I believe it was called. Incredible person. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times, and I mean, it's gone on to be one of the biggest franchises in the world and one of the most played games around.
But so when they're launching it, right, and you go, I've got a game's concept, and in it you're going to be able to beat prostitutes to death, and you're going to be able to shoot people.
Well, I don't think that was the original pitch.
No, okay, well, you could always run over the 8 months.
I don't know what you did. I don't know what you did in the game, Eddie. But...
okay, so in the early days, you could run over the people in the street. The 2D version, right?
Yeah.
And so when somebody's pitching in for the third version, and actually with games and violence and concepts and how far they can push the barrier out there, how do those discussions go? Like, so again, Hiro Capital, let's say you saw Rockstar in the early days and they go, look, we've got this game. We think it's going to be a huge hit. This is the concept. Does it leave a stain on you for going, we think that's going to be phenomenal, we're going to back it? And where do we put the boundary?
Well, we don't. I don't think I think the idea of the game itself is important, but when we're looking at game studios to back, the first thing we're looking at is at the team.
Yeah.
Does the team have the experience, the chops, the creativity, vision to pull this off? Then we look at, is the game fun? Is it connected? Is it the right sort of game that we think is right? And can it scale? Can it do very well? So, but we also don't expect a studio to have a hit on their first go, or that every time they say they're going to release a game, it's going to be a hit. Mm-hmm. That would be an unfair expectation. What we try to do as an investor is to give the right capital support, the right strategic, and we're sort of a little bit atypical as an investment fund because we're not investment analysts. We're not. That isn't our bread and butter. We are entrepreneurs from the games industry.
Yeah.
So we're very sector specific, and we're very, we rely on our network and our intuition and our experience to guide us on investments. But I digress. So we then want to create through capital and through experience and through network and through, strategic help, the right conditions for a game studio to have a fair crack at the whip and to build the environment of success. So that we're not expecting every game to be a hit, but we're expecting that the more they build that intellectual property, the more that they kind of can be nimble to the zeitgeist of the games industry and the consumer base. And, Fortnite and Epic's a perfect example of that. Mm. The more they can, the longer you can stay in the race, the more chance of success that you're going to have. And so that's the kind of environment that we're trying to create for the game studios that we invest in, rather than, hey, we need $10 million because we're launching this game and it's going to make us $500 million.
Gotcha.
That's not the right way to look at game studio investments.
I mean, that is what we were approached with in 2014, 15, 16, were studios that had a couple of half-decent games, and they wanted more capital to just keep running iterative loops. And they thought, well, we're making a bit of headway. We think if we give us another 10 cracks of the whip, we can hit a home run, which is, again, to the uninitiated who don't know the industry, don't know the team, how are you going to take a risk like that? Whereas you need industry specialists. What does a studio do if you've created Fortnite, and as you alluded to earlier, you've smoothed out the tale of how the user has a relationship with your game, where it's not this upfront purchase, it's like a continuous series of re-engagements and augmentations to the game. But why would either user or the studio create something after Fortnite? I mean, Fortnite is this game that's captured everybody's attention. Is it close to the perfect battle royale type game, or do you reskin it, or do you make an updated version?
These days, you don't need to. You can continue. Fortnite can iterate and iterate, and I think what Epic have done really well is what started off as a game has now become a mini metaverse.
Memes. They've got dances for it that people do.
You can go, come for the game, stay for the kind of platform. Like you might play a couple of games of Fortnite, and then Travis Scott's playing tonight, so you're going to join in on that. Or you might, do a dance competition, or you might just hang out with your friends, messing around, or you might watch a movie. They showed Tenet on there.
Really?
Yeah, it was the world premiere of Tenet was in Fortnite.
You're joking?
No. Again, you got to fact check all this stuff I say, Eddie, but because I'm just riffing here, but I'm pretty sure it's true.
So that experience of movie watching, within Fortnite, everybody puts down their weapons and their arms and sits there and watches a movie.
Yeah, or they're jumping around, or they're just making memes, or they're chatting to each other as they're watching it. Absolutely. And that, again, it's redefining, it's this sandbox kind of metaverse-y kind of world. It's not just a game, it's transcending that, right? And Epic are really smart because they're Tim's vision. And what I love so much about Tim and his vision is he is looking ahead. He's building. He is a world builder. The Unreal Engine is his ode to civilization.
That's incredible.
On the same level that Shakespeare gave us, X amount of words of the English language, right? Here is a man who's building worlds.
Well, I encourage anybody to watch the Unreal 5 unveil video that you showed me, and I mean you're absolutely right. I can't remember how many billion tetrahedrons or whatever it is that he creates the universe out of. But looking at that, and another game I looked at recently, which was the most recent version of Flight Simulator.
Yeah, incredible.
You can fly anywhere on planet Earth, anywhere. I mean, it's literally, and when I looked at the level of detail, I was just, with the graphics, I just thought, this almost feels like a simulation, almost feels like real life. I mean, if you embedded that world with more context and more things you could do, I mean...
Yeah, and what they did really smartly is they used the map of the world and then applied an algorithm to it to create, the buildings and things. So it really is lifelike world. Although there are some things that aren't quite right. And I read this real funny meme on the internet where someone said, look, you can't land outside your house and watch yourself playing the game from the cockpit. Is it really worth playing at all?
That's one of the funniest things that I read about it as well, is that one of the first things people do is identify their own house and then crash into it.
Oh, for sure. Why wouldn't you?
It's an extraordinary...
I identified your house and I crashed into your house.
Yeah, I'd have to tell you where I live though, wouldn't I?
But Eddie, I'm hoping you're going to let me have some lunch soon, mate. I
don't know for sure. No, I've kept plenty of your time. It's been really good. And maybe we have many conversations to discuss in the future. But one thing I want it to end on before you can have your lunch is... Maybe just a prediction or series of predictions for the next 3, 5, 10, whatever timescale you think is relevant to the games industry and where we'll be.
Look, like I said, the boot cycle for the games industry is incredibly fast. We are the one phenomenon that I'm particularly interested in at the moment is avatarization. And I've never, maybe I coined that phrase, maybe I didn't. I don't know, but it's a great word.
What Eric Ries, didn't he build that MVNU?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe not. But for me as a gamer, the avatar, the digital representation of myself has been part of my life, right from Ultima Online to World of Warcraft, all the way through, where society is moving more. The physical sense is dissolving, and the digital sense of ourselves is materializing. And a great example of that is Instagram. If you look at my Instagram, it looks like I live the life of Riley, and I look like a pretty cool guy on Instagram, Eddie.
Yeah,
anyone that knows me,
you've got completed the paint swatches on your.
Absolutely, anyone who really knows me realizes that is severely disappointed when they compare it to my Instagram. Snapchat filters. We're seeing, a rise in young girls who are wanting surgery to look more like they're doing it with a Snapchat filter on. We are seeing, humankind more and more creating these digital personas of ourselves, these avatars of ourselves, and projecting it into the world. And I think that is, again, one of those things that is just going to continue to keep growing and keep changing. And I think in 10 years, I really think the idea of the avatar, the idea of a digital self will transcend the real person, the real people that we are. And I'll just finish on one point. I was chatting to this about a good friend of mine called Doom, who runs a startup called Live.tv, which is a XR mixed reality kind of really cool platform. And we were talking about it. We were actually doing that digital panel together that I told about earlier in VR. And we had to choose the way we looked. And we both turned up the same. We were both in black sweatshirts, black jeans, cool trainers, sunglasses, and we both looked like tech bros, as he called it, right? Startup tech bros. But he also said, I wasn't sure about my avatar. Like, I kind of wanted to have like a sword and like a gun, and I wanted to have like this cool like armor, but it was a bit like a serious kind of panel, so I decided not to. And I was like, I thought exactly the same. I was like, where are my twin blades of Azeroth? Where are my kind of, so again, pushing the boundaries of, we ended up both just looking like generic tech pros because it was a tech kind of digital panel. We would both have loved to have gone even further with that. And that, I think, is that playfulness, that gamification, that avatarization of who we really are and how we present ourselves. I think that in the next 10 years is I think, going to be very, very interesting.
Well, and what you touched on there, which is still, that'll be that social credo within that world as well, which means you still have behavioral checking, reputation, and the things that are important to stop things descending into chaos and just indulgent fantasy, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look at the blue tick on Twitter, right? Perfect example of like a kudos metric.
Like, we can only hope that we'll get ours one day by battling the Twitterverse for long enough,
Well, I think Twitter's struggling. Yeah, Twitter's become something quite dangerous and quite difficult at the moment, but you never know. Anyway, thanks for having me, Eddie.
Yeah, buddy. Have a good lunch, and we'll catch up soon.
Brilliant.